Good evening. I'm Jim Logan. Welcome to our presentation tonight, Data-Driven Decisions, Electronic ID Tags, and Genetic Selection, which will be followed by a producer panel entitled Incorporating EID into Flock Management. And I'll be the introductory person tonight. Not this morning. It might be someplace, but not here. Sitting in kind of for Cindy Wolf, who had another commitment this evening. And joining us from ASI are Amy Hendrickson and Erica Sanko. And we want to thank Jay Parsons for being here to moderate this. Also, we want to thank the USDA Animal Plant Health Inspection Service for helping to fund this through a cooperative agreement, with the balance of the funding support coming from the American Sheep Industry Association. So with that said, I will introduce Julie Finzel, who will present the data-driven decisions, electronic ID tags, and genetic selection. And if there's time after Julie's presentation, we'll take a couple of questions, but then we'll be moving right into our panel. So if you have questions or comments as the presentations are going on, please type those into the chat box. With that, Julie, I'll introduce you. Julie Finzel is a Livestock and Natural Resources Advisor at the University of California Cooperative Extension. Julie is a second-generation rancher and holds a master's in rangeland ecology and management. Julie?
Right. Thank you, Jim. Thanks so much. All right, I am going to go ahead and, well, I'll leave my camera on for one moment. I want to give a shout out before I get started to my research team. I could not have done this project without them. They were great. Dr. Allison Van Eenenum, Dr. Rosie Bush, Austin Brown, Morgan Doran, John Harper, Dan Macon, and Rebecca Ozeran. I'm going to present data tonight that was from a research project funded by Western SARE. And so I want to make sure I say thank you to them for funding the project and allowing us to do the research. So with that, I will, I'll go ahead and turn off my camera and we're going to dive right in. All right, so if it's going to go, let's see here. There. All right, so most of you are familiar with the Let's Grow initiatives. This webinar is part of that. And the Let's Grow initiatives really focus on growing the US sheep flock and ways to do that. They were in response to a decline in the US sheep numbers. US sheep numbers continue to drop 1 to 2% every year. So here locally, I know a sheep producer who sold a sheep. And so that certainly hits close to home here in Bakersfield. And in 2021, there were 402 million pounds of lamb consumed in the US. And almost 70% of that was imported. And I don't want this to be seen as a negative, because to me, this is opportunity. This is really a place, the Let's Grow initiatives, there's a place for America to produce more lamb, and there's a market for it here in the United States. So I think it's an opportunity and it's exciting. So we wanted to do a project that looked at what producers can do to actually to grow their flocks or to produce more lamb on the ground. What practical things can producers do? And so what we decided to do was we collected DNA samples from rams and lambs from 5 ranches. And so every animal that we collected a tissue sample from, we put an electronic ID tag in their ear. Electronic ID tags are sometimes also referred to as radio frequency ID tags, or RFID tags. We submitted those samples to Superior's Flock 54 test, and through the Flock 54 test, we determined parentage of lambs, so which bucks sired which lambs. We focused on market lambs because we wanted to take advantage of Superior's state-of-the-art camera grading system. So what Superior has done is they installed a camera grading system that automatically reads the EID tag, the electronic ID tag, in the lamb's ear, or what in the animal's ear, and then it connects it to the carcass. And so as the animal moves through the line, it connects the carcass qualities and the carcass traits to the animal through the camera grading system. And then we took that one step further, and because we knew which bucks sired which lambs, we were able to connect those carcass qualities to the rams. All right, so just a little bit about the producers in our study. The majority of them were large flock producers. We did have one small flock producer. The breeds were mostly blackface. We did have one whiteface, well, blackface or composite, and then one whiteface producer. And so there was a fair amount of variation within the producers, just in their management style and a few other things. So the samples that we collected 2,963 samples in total, and we actually submitted 2,254 of those. So there were multiple reasons for that, but we ran out of money. We would have sampled all of them, but we just didn't quite have enough money to fund all of it. But we got most of it done, and so that was really great. And this graph it's a little busy, and I'm going to explain it. So it's a graph that displays the genetic variation in the lambs that we sampled. And so each ranch has a color. So like ranch B is blue, right? And so you can see ranch B kind of off to the left, and then the rest of them kind of off on the right. And so if I just move forward a little bit, we can clean that graph up, and we can just make it a little more simple by focusing on only 3 ranches. And we see that ranch B is that whiteface operation, and ranch A and D are blackface or composites. And so we see that spread between the whiteface and the blackface. Now just keep that kind of in your head, because we're going to revisit that in a little bit. All right, so the parentage results from flock 54. These are for ranch A, and these are specifically for ram lambs, so for the male lambs. Now, typically we can assume that every ram produces about 50% males and 50% females. So since we only sampled ram lambs, we can make a guess that this ram that produced 61 male lambs also produced 61 female lambs, for a total of 122, give or take a few. So that's a pretty significant, that's a lot of lambs for that ram, right? And ranch A had a ram to ewe ratio of 1 to 10. So that's a pretty low ratio, right? All right, now for ranch B, they have a ram to ewe ratio of 1 to 35. But this is for, so the numbers we see here are for all of the lambs. These are not just male or just female. These are all of the lambs. So the top 10 most prolific breeders sired 61% of the lambs from ranch B. All right, for ranch C was our small flock producer. The top 2 most prolific breeders sired 69% of the lambs, and the ram to ewe ratio was 1 to 30, or about 1 to 35. For ranch D, the top 5 most prolific breeders sired 69% of the lambs. So 5 rams sired almost 70% of the lambs on this ranch, and they have a ram to ewe ratio of 1 to 50, so a pretty high ratio. And we see kind of a similar result as we saw from ranch A, where we have 2 rams actually, that produced 135 lambs and 133 lambs. So these were really active breeders. For ranch E, the top 3 most prolific breeders sired 74% of the lambs analyzed. The ram to ewe ratio is 1 to 40. And for ranch E, just the way the sheep producer manages his operation, we sampled about 25 sires, and he turned those bucks out with the ewes, but then towards the end he had to turn out some cleanup rams, and so we didn't actually have the genetic information for all of the rams that were used on this band, and so we just can't. We had some that we couldn't identify parentage for. All right, so the results. We only got carcass measurements. We were only able to get carcass measurements for Ranch A and Ranch B. But if you remember, we're gonna try and remember back to that graph that I showed you, the plot that showed the genetic variation. And remember, Ranch B is that white face block, and Ranch A is the black face. And so what we see is that on the hook, these animals are actually really similar. They have similar hot weights and just generally in size, they look really similar. So that's a really interesting outcome there. Now this graph shows what we did was we created EPDs for the rams in Ranch A, and we so the average hot carcass weight is this 0 line in the middle here. I don't know if you guys can see my pointer or not, but there's a 0 line in the middle that runs straight across. And then there's some bars that go down below the line. So those lambs would be below the average. And the bars that go above the line are the lambs that are above average. And the skinny red lines are error bars. And so what they indicate is basically sample size. So the really small error bars indicate that there were a lot, that ram sired a lot of lambs. So statistically, we are more certain about, or we have more samples to say what we expect that ram might produce in the future. So if a producer wanted to increase hot weight, you'd look over to ram, say like ram 320718 with the purple arrow. There are small error bars there, and they're also, those hot carcass weights are significantly above the average. So those rams would help a producer achieve that goal of larger or higher hot carcass weights. Okay. So I'm gonna kind of shift gears here a little bit, and I want to talk about managing individuals versus managing the flock. So by managing individuals, I'm speaking about tracking individual performance to move the flock forward, to move a flock forward as a whole. And what that means is if there, if a guy has data on, let's say like all of his ewes, and he's able to say, wow, look at these ewes down here at the bottom of my spreadsheet after I've sorted it, and they're not pulling their weight. They are costing me money. They are not making me money. So that's one way that managing individuals versus managing the flock can help a producer be more effective when they're culling. Managing individuals allows a producer to select for increased pounds of lamb weaned per ewe. So we're going to be talking about pounds of lamb weaned per ewe a lot. It's just like a trait that I chose to focus on for this webinar. The data can reduce lamb grafting. So if a producer says, man, I'm spending a lot of time in that lambing shed, I think I better, I really like to reduce how much time I'm spending there. Then they can select for ewes who can count to 2, or ewes who don't need help lambing, or sort of things like that. And so when you're tracking individuals, you can use that data to select for ewes that meet breeding objectives for the flock. And then a producer could also reduce the dollars spent on animal health. So let's just use worming as an example. If someone, if a producer decides, hey, I'm worried about resistance to dewormers, and I don't want it to be deworming the whole flock. So they're going to start tracking how often they deworm individuals, and then they're going to start calling the individuals that maybe the ones that need to be dewormed more than twice or something like that. So however it might work for each producer. So before I move forward talking about electronic identification, I want to take a quick step back and just talk about some of the tools for genetic selection that are in the toolbox. Visual assessment is one, and it's a very valid tool. Visual assessment is important in selecting animals, and either that might need to go to sale or for replacements. It's still a very valid tool. There's also individual animal ID, so not the electronic type, but just where each animal has its own ID number, and then those ID numbers and any corresponding data for the animal are recorded either on paper or maybe they're typed straight into like an iPad or a tablet of some sort. Paint brands are a really effective method, right? Like a guy could just paint brand all his twins, so he wants to focus on more twins, or paint brand the open ewes after Preg testing, or maybe paint brand the sheep that have been dewormed twice, right? There's also ear notches and marks. Those are really effective. I was speaking to a guy a while back, and he said, yeah, I decided I wanted to start selecting for twins, so I punched a hole right in the middle of their ear. So when they're coming down the lane and I see them coming, I can see that hole and I know that they were a twin lamb. So that's one really effective way if someone wants to select for twins or any other specific trait in the flock. I mentioned Preg testing. Preg testing is a great way to select for more fertile individuals. You know, and then electronic ID tags, which we're going to focus on for today. So why are we focusing on electronic ID tags? And correspondingly individual animal records, and it's because we know it works. So this graph is from the dairy industry, and they started for this data set, they started collecting data on individual animals and the amount of milk they produced in 1952. And so over time, through careful selection and data management, they were able to create significant change in the amount of milk each cow produces, right? So managing individuals creates genetic change toward a defined goal, right? Using electronic ID tags improves the reliability of the data. In general, it just makes genetic selection easier. It streamlines the process. And it also, so electronic ID tags also, any sort of individual animal ID, facilitate animal disease traceability. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. All right, so I wanted to share this viewpoint from Evan Helly. Most of you probably are aware of the Helly sheep operation. I believe it's in Montana. And Evan said, when you're tending to 5,000 to 8,000 sheep, or 5 to 8 bands every year, having every ram, ewe, and lamb microchip saves ranch hands both time and labor while increasing information accuracy. And so I have saves time and labor bolded and sort of brought out because on the surface, it might sound like using electronic ID tags is going to cause someone to have to work more. It might, you know, it's going to be more time, more work. You have to figure out a whole new process. And certainly there's going to be some inputs up front as far as time and learning. But in the end, electronic ID tags and electronic ID tags being used for managing individuals is going to save time and labor, and it's going to move the flock as a whole towards whatever defined objective a sheep producer might have. Okay, so in one case study back in 2004, they used EIDs to eliminate OPP in 2 Western range flocks, and they tested all the ewes for OPP, and they separated the ewes into bands that were negative for OPP and bands that were positive. And all the positive bands, all the ewes that were positive were kept separate. There were no replacements kept from the OPP positive bands. And so they didn't just cull those ewes, they kept them, and they were able to sell the lambs and receive the income from those lambs, but they didn't keep any replacements from the OPP positive band, which means that all the replacements came from the negative. And so they slowly, over time, the ewes from the OPP positive flock would have to go to sale, and then eventually the OPP positive flocks were gone. And what they saw in this study was a reduction in death loss. I believe it was 12 or 13% when they started, and it was 1.3% when they were done. And they also saw a reduction in the amount of money spent on animal health, treating mastitis and things. So there was an estimated $12 per ewe saved total. So if this was, say, like a 3,000 ewe flock, that's $3,600. That's not pocket change. So, all right, so when considering EIDs, I really recommend a thorough analysis. Talk to other producers and other people who have used them, or just kind of have information on them. Ask questions, what made them decide to use EIDs? How did they start using them? Why did they choose like the EIDs and the tag readers that they chose? And maybe, even if someone could go visit an operation and kind of see how it's done, that provides a lot of opportunity for a really thorough understanding before stepping into something really new like this. It's really important to discuss it with all affected parties so that everyone's on board. So like if it's a family operation, got to sit down at the dinner table and talk about, if this is going to really fit for the operation. If there's hired labor, you want to make sure everyone understands and really wants to participate and see it work. It does require some experience with Excel, but YouTube has a ton of resources on there, and so I think that any sort of learning curve with Excel could be overcome by just watching a few YouTubes. And it is important to consider the costs and the returns. So I am going to present a mock partial budget later just to review some of that. But it's important to pencil it out and make sure that it's going to be a profitable venture for your operation. Okay, so I really wanted to show actual data used to make decisions about what to keep and what to sell. So my colleague Dan Macon actually was kind enough to share this this information, this data from his recent, he had to, he was doing his annual culling, and he was kind enough to share this. He's an advisor with Extension, and he also owns his own band of sheep, Flying Mule Farm. So some of you may know Dan. So when we're looking at this, Dan made sure to list the age of every ewe. He gives every ewe an Easy Care score. An Easy Care score is a way of rating a ewe's mothering ability, but also, if they need assistance in lambing. And so a 3 is good. A -3 is like a +3 is the best you can get, and a -3 is the worst. So Dan's been using this Easy Care score system for a while, so he's got a whole bunch of 2s and 3s. And then the average 100-day weight is the total weight of the lambs from the ewe. So if it's a single lamb or twins, it's the total. Dan's really focusing on that he doesn't want to deworm his flock, so he gave them a rating based on that. And he also gave them a score based on their age, and then he converted the average 100-day weight into a score so that he could create an index. And so in that index, Dan, if we just look at the very top one, number 2201, the Easy Care score is 3. And then if she had been dewormed, it would be a -1. It would be 3 - 1, but she wasn't. So it's 3 - 0, so it's 3. The age score is 1, so you add that, so it's 4. And then the weight score is 2, So it's 4 plus 2 is 6. So that's how he got that index score. And he did that across the board. So for the bottom U, there is the easy care score is 2. That U was not dewormed, but the H score is a -1. So 2 minus 1 is 1. And then 1 minus 2 is a negative. So that total index is 0. So that's how he got that. And then he was able to sort out what he was going to keep and what he was going to sell. So that's kind of what it looks like. And I like that Dan created an index because it makes it really objective. You don't have to, you know, a producer doesn't have to create an index, but it just sort of makes the decision-making process really objective. So moving into the partial budget analysis for whether or not EIDs might pay, there are 4 questions to consider. What new or additional costs will be incurred? So what extra money might have to be paid out? What current income will be lost or reduced? What income just isn't going to be coming in, right? What new or additional income will be received? Will there be any more money coming in? And what current costs will be reduced or eliminated? So is there a chance that there's going to be less money spent, right? Okay, so here's my mock partial budget. If I had a 3,000 ewe flock and my objectives were to increase the pounds weaned per ewe by 10%, and at the same time, I wanted to spend less time in the lambing shed. I wanted to increase the mothering ability of ewes. I want them to count to 2, and I want them to, you know, make sure their sheep are their lambs are with them. So I said that the tag reader was going to cost about $2,500. They don't all cost that much, but that was what I said this one might cost. I said that the tags were going to cost about $1. I could be a little off on that, but that's kind of a good place to start. I said that labor was going to be $172.25 per man per day. That's based on California rates, so it's probably a lot different other places. And I said that it was going to take about three days or 3 men in 1 day to get all the tags put in. And so in this example, I wanted to focus on just the maternal band, so just the band of sheep that I would be breeding for replacement, that I would be selecting replacement ewes from. So in that way, you know, with a 3,000 ewe flock, I could put tags on the whole thing, or I could just focus on the maternal band. And so I wanted to focus on the maternal band. I couldn't think of any income that would be lost or reduced as a result of this, but certainly there are expenses. Using the assumption that ewes stay in a flock for about 4 years, I would have replaced the entire flock in 4 years. So I calculated 900 lamb tags times 4 years to get 3,600. And you know, the price of sheep, I just said, well, it's about $3, could be up or down. And then what I did was I calculated more lambs, but it could be just that, you know, there's heavier singles. It doesn't have to be an increase in twinning. It could be just be heavier singles, but an increase of 10%. So if the lambing rate was 100 lambs weaned 110% and went up 10% to 120%, that's 300 more lambs. So 300 times an average lamb weight of 105 is 31,500 pounds, sorry. And that's a total increased income of 94,500. So this is just a potential one. And I didn't calculate any labor for the producer. And that's not because there is no labor for the producer in this. It's because I know that some producers really track their labor and the costs associated with it, and some don't. And so I left that blank for you know, a guy to fill in whatever it might be. Okay, so moving on, I wanted to put in a plug for this rightrisk.org website. I presented a partial budget analysis, which is one way, you know, you do it on the back of a napkin. One way to assess if something might work, just kind of quick and dirty. Rightrisk.org has really thorough risk assessment tools. It was put together by Cooperative Extension from multiple states. So there's a lot of really great energy and brain power put into it. There's a lot of really great tools here, and for more than just like if a producer is considering electronic ID tags. So I encourage everyone to check it out. So we talked a lot about individual animal management or managing individuals to create genetic change in a sheep flock as a whole. And this is really something that is going to work for someone who wants to make genetic change in their flock. So if a producer is really satisfied with how their flock is performing, then EIDs might not be the choice for them. But if someone has some ideas about where they want to see their flock go, this could be a good tool. And it's important to have clearly defined goals so you know where you want to go. And I have a map here because, you know, when you're reading a map, you need to know where you want to go, but you have to know where you are so you know how to get there, right? And so it's important to know your starting point. And that really starts with actually getting started with the EIDs, putting them in, collecting a year of data, and then just taking a step back and looking at where the flock is, sort of the current status of the flock. And that's not to say that the first year of data is just empty. There's certainly an opportunity where you get the data back and you're sitting there looking at it after a year and you go, wow, these ewes, you know, after you sort it, these ewes down here at the bottom, they I had to deworm them a lot. You know, I had to deworm them twice in 1 year, and that's just outside of what my goals are. So in that case, you know, that might pay off right away, right? So I promised that we were going to talk about using EID tags, RFID tags as a scrapie tag. So that's one of the really cool things about these EID tags. They can do double duty. They can be your scrapie tag on your sheep, and they can also be a management tool. So when using, so if someone does not have this already, in order to get scrapie tags, first you must obtain a flock ID and a national premise number, or a PIN. It's a PIN or it's a location identification number, a LID. It depends on what state you're in. So you get your PIN or your LID from your state animal health office. Once you have that, you call the USDA at their 866 USDA tag to get your flock ID. USDA will link your flock ID to your PIN or LID, and it will all be connected. And then the USDA has 840 official numbers, which are linked to the flock and premise number for traceability, for disease traceability. So this is specific for the National Scrapie Eradication Program, right? But we all learned from COVID some of the importances of disease traceability, and there are other diseases that this could be used for, and we really don't ever want to have to deal with that, but it could be helpful if we did. So then you can go, so once you have your 840 official numbers, you can purchase the 840 scrapie tags from an approved provider. And so this slide basically says the same thing as the last one, but I included some links here. So if someone would like more information on the USDA Scrapie Eradication Program, they can go to this website, which we can always provide a link for, to read more about it. There's a lot of information there. I surfed around a little bit. Again, I just wanted to say, you know, this is the number and you need to contact your state vet. And then to get the 840 EIDs, you can go to this website, and APHIS actually has a list of approved vendors that provide scrapie, the 840 EIDs, the scrapie approved, National Scrapie Eradication approved program tags. So with that, these are my references, and I want to thank everyone for their time.
Thanks, Julie. We do have time for just one or two questions. If anybody has a quick question, somebody did share in the chat the wide range in costs for stick readers of EIDs, and think some of us have seen some of those. They put a range of $330 up to $2,300, and of course, there's various reasons for those price differences, but there is a wide range on what you actually might buy out there. So if anybody has a quick question for Julie, you can go ahead and put that in the question and answer or question box on your control panel. And while we're waiting for a few minutes for that, I'll ask our producer panelists to go ahead and light themselves up, as I said, as far as turning on their cameras, and we'll move on to our producer panel discussion here shortly. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions come in right now. And Julie, if you wouldn't mind just sticking around and joining us at the end, that would be fine, because we might have some questions come in specific to your presentation. So, okay, so you guys see our three illustrious producers on your share screen there, and let me go ahead and get rid of the. Oops, just give me just a moment here to. There we go. Okay. So, okay. So we're glad to have some producers join us this evening as panelists that have had some experience using EID, and I'll just go with the order they're on my screen. From Michigan, we have Elaine Palm with Great Lakes Lamb. And from Montana, we have Kristen Bieber, and they raise Targhee sheep up there, is the notes that I have. And then out in California, Ryan Mahoney with Emigh Livestock. So we're pleased to have all of these producers on to share some of their firsthand knowledge with using EID. And so we're going to start with a very simple question and give you a chance to tell people a little bit about your operation and how you came about the decision to actually use EID in your operation. And then if you care to share, go ahead and share with how you ended up choosing the tags and software that you're actually using. So let's just go in the order I introduced you. We'll move from east to west on this one. Elaine, if you'd like to go first.
Sure, that was a lot of prompts. Which question would you like me to address first?
Basically, tell us a little bit about your operation and how you came about using EID.
All right, so I am a farmer full-time outside of my full-time career in agriculture, and I farm in partnership with my two parents. And at the time, I think it was about 2017 that we started with electronic ID. And what we were looking to do is we were wanting to do better before we did bigger. And we had maybe about 350 sheep at the time, and we were climbing, but in using the electronic identification in the first year, we really dropped our number and did better with a smaller number, because as what's been mentioned in this webinar and in part one, culling is a great kind of benefit to, like smart culling is a great benefit to using electronic ID. And so we are climbing again now that we're kind of through that initial phase, and that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. Awesome. Kristen, would you like to share a little bit about your operation, just enough to give us a feel for how you're implementing EID, and then how you came about the decision to use EID?
Sure. We're based in eastern Montana. We raise both registered and commercial Targhees. How we the reason we got into EID tags to start with is the registered animals are on NSIP. And anyone that's dealt with NSIP knows that that is a lot of labor spent in front of both a scale and a computer. And so we had looked into EID tags, we knew that it would definitely speed up our ability to take data in the barn. And then looking into the different programs and finding Shearwell communicated with Pedigree Master, that made it a pretty easy decision to go with that software to speed up data input into the computer. And as with most things, we use the registered sheep as guinea pigs, and we're like, if this works on the registered sheep, we'll go on with the commercials. And we liked what we saw with the registered sheep. We already knew what the baseline performance on those things from collecting previous data, and with how easily the EID tags worked on them, we're like, well, let's open a can of worms and put them in the commercial sheep. And so that was, we got the EID tags 5 years ago for the registered NSIP sheep, and we implemented it into the commercials 4 years ago. And so now at this point, we're collecting the same data on all the commercials as we do on the registered NSIP animals. And we've mainly been using it to, like Elaine said, make smart culling and selection decisions. For instance, in 600 head that we're shed lambing, the ewes that consistently single don't pay money to us. So they went down to our range lambing operation. They're good ewes, but they're just not optimal for a shed lambing operation. Conversely, ewes that have twins every year, when they come across the scale, and we've discovered 2 years in a row they've lost one lamb, we really don't need those ewes here. So that's really what we've been using it for, is making, like Elaine said, smart culling and selection decisions.
Awesome. And Ryan, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your operation, how you came about the decision to use EID.
Sure. So we're out in California, and California, we've been dealing with high labor costs and just expenses going up constantly. And then we ended up, I got the opportunity to go over to Australia through the Tri-Lamb program, and was able to kind of tour around some of their stuff they were doing there, and kind of blew my mind the technology available that was there that wasn't really being used out here. It was being used, but it was kind of sparse and spread out. And so anyway, we started using EIDs in our, we actually started in our cows first, and then we started in our sheep. And the main driver on the sheep was where we're at in the Montezuma Hills, which is kind of in the delta, between the coast and the delta. We get a lot of foot rot or foot problems in our sheep, and so the main driver was to put these EID tags in to be able to limit our expense in our feet. And we went from trimming 80% of the herd down to trimming 10% in the matter of like 3 or 4 years. And the benefit of that has just, it's compounded year over year over year. You see better, just when you make better genetic decisions, it pays you back in a lot of different ways. And so the EIDs kind of helped open the door for that to happen. There's definitely a lot more to it than just putting a tag in an ear, but yeah, it definitely helped kind of launch the improvement we saw in our ranch. And I think it kind of has helped us to be able to stay a viable operation, being faced with the labor challenges that we're looking at now with the full implementation of the ag overtime rules for California. So it's been really beneficial to us, and I'm sure you'll ask questions that will lead me further down those rabbit holes. So I'll let you ask them.
Yeah, wow, those are great, and I sense a consistent theme there, making good decisions, especially with culling and just moving towards a target. We did get a question popped into our question box that's relevant, so I'll go ahead and ask it now. It says, what do you feel is the magic flock size for when using EID makes sense financially? And I'm sure you guys have given that some thought in terms of that initial investment in the equipment. Of course, then there's a variable investment in the tags, which is minor compared to just adopting it. So Ryan, we just left off with you, and you gave a sigh of relief there. So I know you've thought about that one. Would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I think Kristen may have alluded to it, or Elaine, but defining goals is probably, actually it was Julie, I think, in her presentation. Defining your goals of a flock will lead you down that road. So if you have 3 head and you want to produce the best fiber in the world, you better start tracking that data objectively, and EID tags are the easiest way to do it. If you got 10,000 ewes and 10 bands running all over the mountains, and you define a goal that you want to see genetic improvements, the best way to be able to kind of gather that data objectively and keep it stored and make decisions based off of it would be EIDs. I really don't see any other way. We have about 4,000 ewes that we run and 1,500 mother cows that are all chipped. And so, I mean, it works on our scale. It works really well. We've seen dramatic improvements. And so I'll let you guys answer it in your guys' way. But yeah, I don't think there's a size difference. And it's more about the amount of equipment you buy. So, I mean, you can buy a used couple $100 tag reader and a $100 laptop with Excel on it and scan tags and collect data and make decisions based off it if you have a few head. And as you scale up, you probably need better equipment. But
Great. Elaine, you want to go next?
Sure, I would say I definitely agree with that. The equipment is only as good as what you use it for, right? So if you're going to make the investment and then not use the investment, you're not going to get a lot out of it, right? So the data is only as good as the data that you put into it. And so for us, when we got started in it, we tagged all of our flock and all of the lambs, you know, and we don't skip any, even if we know right from the get-go we're not going to keep this lamb. We still want to track its data because we want to track the data of its mother and just keep rolling with, you know, everything builds on it, all of what we put into it.
Okay, great. And Kristen, you mentioned, well, maybe we lost Kristen. Is she still here? You may have lost her.
Your connections seem to be a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah. Kristen, are you still here? Okay, we'll give her a minute. Your microphone's on mute, Kristen, but it looks like you're still logged in. Okay.
Yeah, my connection was getting pretty sketchy, so I turned the camera off.
Oh, no, that's fine. So you had mentioned your registered flock and commercial flock and stuff, and you know, any thoughts on the right size of flock to go throughout this adoption process of incorporating EID?
I was thinking about that. We originally, when we got into it, we're like, you know, probably about 150 head would be the small end. And then after dealing with it and the fact that we are a ranch that operates pretty much with 2 people, and we've got several different irons in the fire and talking to other producers, I think it just, you know, what's your labor worth? The EID tags definitely speed things up for us. It helps us make faster, more accurate decisions because you know, we don't deal as much with human error. And also when we get ready to sort out culls, I've looked at the raw data, their production reports, and I have a pretty good idea what I want to do with them. And so we spend a lot less time humming, hawing, and hawing about things out down there in the barn. So I know, you know, I think it realistically, EID tags would be a benefit to just about every size flock. It's just kind of, what are your goals? You know, some decisions can be made just eyeballing the sheep, and that's fine. Other things, the increased accuracy of the EID tags and the software Excel spreadsheets that go along with it make decisions way easier to make and way faster to make.
Okay, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. Did you decide to tag only some animals in order to collect certain data, or did you tag all the animals? Elaine already alluded to tagging all of them, and I'm assuming there's no regrets by the smile on your face. Okay, Ryan, how about you? Did you guys tag them all or just some of them?
We targeted our tagging, so I think it's a little rhyme. But no, we only tagged our females, and then because we tried to look at it from an economic perspective on how can we save money, because if you put you got 4,000 ewes, and then we have about 5,000 lambs a year we get off of those, so that's $9,000 to put into a tag in every single ear using the dollar figure. You already have to put a scrapie tag in the ewe's ear anyway, and that tag costs about $1 without the EID chip, and so that was pretty no-brainer. And then our goals, you got to define those goals first if you're going to use them, use EIDs or any kind of data. You got to have the goals in mind, and so we really wanted to work on our maternal herd and raising our replacement sheep, and also our replacement calves, heifers, in the same vein, being able to track their production, not from a production standpoint like Elaine's doing, but very much from a cost standpoint. So how much labor are you putting into them? So like our foot rot that I mentioned, I think we were at like we were trimming 80% of the sheep. That's 3 guys all day long turning sheep over, trimming hooves. That's a lot of time, a lot of labor, a lot of dollars spent per ewe. We also, when we go through our lambing barns now, we track lambs produced per guy, and we try to really focus that number in to get those ratios right. And the tags are part of the tool that helps us kind of get that maximum efficiency. And so it's very much a cost-driven approach. And so we only tag our females. We did tag our males for the study that was presented. We were part of that and presented some. But yeah, we really focus on the females.
Great. And yeah, Kristen, in your situation, you said that you tagged the registered flock and then the commercial flock, correct? Did you tag all of them, or was there a selection there?
No, after the initial year with just having the registered sheep tagged, we went through and tagged everything. We tagged all of the existing commercial flock, and then at lambing, we tagged every lamb, because at this point, I guess what's driving our selection stuff is total pounds of lambs weaned. Like I mentioned earlier, we run in eastern Montana. We lamb in April. The ewes and lambs are around the barn for a couple of weeks, and then we turn them out and tell them we'll see them in 4 months. So we like, what we're looking for is being able to find the ewes that went out with 2 lambs, and which ones brought both lambs back in. And when we got that figured out, then looking for the ones that brought in the heaviest lambs comparative to the ewe's total body weight. So that was our decision to tag everything. And at this point, we even have our range lambers tagged, because we've gone to ultrasounding or preg checking those and being able to kind of get an idea what ewes are coming in dry and what has been their past, at least bred performance. We don't necessarily know how they lambed out, but just being able to make some more decisions accurately on those ewes as well.
Great. And we've had some people type in questions somewhat about cost, but let me ask it a little bit differently here, because everything you guys are talking about has to do with information, right? Information on the individual animal. And of course, we can, in our minds, picture the benefits of electronic ID. But in reality, we could just tag them and visually, do it manually. So in your mind, what is the best or most important benefit for actually using EID versus just identifying the animals? And I don't know who wants to take that on first and just talk about the greatest benefit of actually having EID in your flock. Any volunteers, or I need to pick someone?
Pick someone. I'll go in a minute. I'm looking up some numbers.
All right. Elaine, you were thinking. You get to go first.
Sure. Ask the question again, if you would.
Okay, so the benefit is obvious that the animals and you keep track of it, but you can also do that manually, right?
Right.
So you think somebody with 10 head, they can write down numbers and keep number ear tags. So in your mind, if somebody said, well, what's the most important benefit to actually adopt an electronic ID versus just ID, what would you tell them?
Yeah, we've always had records on our farm, always. Like every year we've ever had sheep back to the 70s, right? Not that I was around for that, but we have them in books, and we're not always doing a great job of analyzing the data. And so electronic identification helped us truly make data-driven decisions. And the program is already written, right? So some of that work is, you know, taking into account lots of things that we weren't necessarily thinking about. So I guess that's a good starting point for the discussion, but also like the information is only as good as what you put into it. So all of the data that you would want to be analyzing needs to be recorded. And so Kristen mentioned making decisions based on like total pounds weaned from ewes, right? Without our scale, we wouldn't be best utilizing that data. So the scale and the electronic ID kind of go hand in hand at our place. And for instance, then weighing every single animal before it leaves the farm, we are crediting the mother for that. If we were to put in an average weight, right? Say we take a big group to an auction barn, and we just use the average weight, we're getting average data then for all of these animals. By weighing every single lamb before it leaves the farm and putting that into the system, we're getting better data and therefore making better decisions based on that. And we weren't going to do that in written form, likely.
Ryan, did you get your numbers looked up?
Yes. So when we started, I said when we started EIDs, we did it really focused on improving our foot health. You can go through your sheep. So we get our rains in the winter, and then it dries out for the summer, and so we break with foot rot in the spring. And you go through the sheep and you trim them and you run them through the foot bath, or you can cull the worst ones, or you can cull everyone with bad feet. But we were trimming in 2016 when we started EIDs and started tracking. We trimmed 100% of the sheep and we retreated 60% of the sheep. But then you breed in May, and then you work your way all the way through, and those sheep stay in your system, and you breed your maternal rams to the sheep that you trimmed, or maybe not, you're not quite sure because you got a lot of sheep that are going through your system. In 2 years, we were able to cut that down to about 13% of the sheep that were getting trimmed, not by just culling everything, but by taking our herd and splitting it into a terminal herd and a maternal herd, and the ones that weren't getting foot rot were getting bred to our replacements, and that's what we were retaining. And then the ones that had bad feet, we would trim them, and then we would breed them to a terminal sire and then sell the lambs, and then we wouldn't be replacing in the herd. And over a 3-year period, we basically eliminated that cost, and we went from spending $10+ a head down to spending $4. And so that was our goal. We defined that goal at the beginning. We saw what it was costing us. We had an idea of what it was going to improve for us, and how, I mean, a dollar tag, and then put maybe $1 a head on everything, or $2 a head on everything for some of the infrastructure, and then you end up paying for everything, and we cut our cost by $5 a head. So that was like an immediate return. But then our biggest return by far was in 2016. We lambed out a 91% lamb crop, And by paying attention to the keeping the pregnancy scan data, paying attention to what ewes do well, what ewes don't do well, getting rid of your opens and your habitual problems by looking at the raw data rather than looking at the pretty sheep. And it's not so much that you're wrong in what you see, it's you're proving yourself right or wrong with the data. And this current year, we're sitting at 127% lamb crop. So we've added 35 or 36% to our lamb crop, which is substantial dollars. So you had your little improvement in the feet, but then the big improvement actually went to this being able to actually manipulate your lambing percentage to where you want. I don't want all twins because I like singles because they're low cost, and I like some singles in our lambing barn system. But you're able to actually kind of breed for that and work towards your optimal efficiency rather than just, you know, if we just blindly kept twins, we'd have a lot of dead lambs at lambing because our lambing barns are only so big and we wouldn't be able to handle them if everything we had was a twin. So it's really important to know and work towards your optimal efficiency. And like I said, by defining a goal, figuring out what it costs you, then you can start to work back and see what that will do. And then like with EIDs, your tags, like you got to buy scraping tags already. So you have to actually, if you're going to really truly cost it out, you have to take what you're doing and then honestly evaluate what you're going to be replacing or whether you're going to be continuing to do the same thing. So you can say the tag's going to cost you $1, my labor collecting data is going to cost this much, the software is going to cost that much. But if you're already recording data on a paper and putting it in a computer and you're paying attention to all these things, you're already doing a lot of the costs of EID. It's just a different way to collect that data. So it's not so much as all straight up cost. It's almost, I don't know, you kind of do it two at once. So
Good. And Kristen, what would you say in terms of the best or biggest benefit of actually using EID over just regular EID or regular ID?
Pretty much just echo what Ryan said. When we approached it, none of the commercials had individual IDs. We put a color in to say what age they are, and that was it. And so being able to have all of the commercials identified and be able to have records on them, and even it was interesting looking at the difference in our management on the registered, which we do take information on, or had been taking information on earlier. But everything was down on a piece of paper somewhere. And that ewe that was really obnoxious in the barn and I never wanted to see her again kept slipping through because I forgot that I wanted to cull her when we got to that great day that is weaning and sorting everything. And with the EID tags, being able to have her flagged in the system that she needs to leave, made a huge difference. Kind of on the same thing as Ryan, not necessarily foot rot, but just general prolificacy and production on the ewes. We started going through and taking out the ewes that we called the underperformer ones, the ones that went out with twins, that we turned out of the barn with twins. They came back in with a single, and they were never really good singles. They were definitely below par, but the ewe looked awesome. And in the alley, without knowing what, you know, where her lambs were at, she looked like a good ewe that brought in a decent single. And then when we got the EID tags, we discovered, well, she's a real fat ewe that brought in a small lamb, and we turned her out with 2. We don't want her here anymore. So that's where we kind of found immediately that we, you know, this could definitely, it costs money to put the tags in, have the software and the hardware, but, you know, it won't take long for the system to pay itself back. And then this year we had a pretty rough lambing because of weather. And we would have been so lost without the electronic tags being able to keep track of what was going on and where, you know, some of the lambs that didn't make it, where their mothers were, so we could later on get them sorted off into a different group. They didn't need to be with all the ewes and lambs. We could run them separately as dries. If we hadn't had EID tags, then we wouldn't have been able to do that.
Good, and I'll add a little personal story to that. The project that Julie was talking about with the large flock eliminating OPP, I was a part of that. And you guys have alluded to this a little bit here in terms of just the benefits of EID, but just to give you an idea, we didn't use EID at the beginning of that. They were actually using visual IDs. And testing for OPP involves a blood test. So you're drawing a sample, labeling a tube, sending off to lab, come back and finding the animals and sorting them. If you think of that process, but we went from roughly a 15 to 16% error rate in that process to less than 1% error rate, which is huge when you're spending all of that money on collecting or trying to collect information on all your flock. And Elaine, you mentioned writing it down on a sheet of paper. And of course, I'm immediately thinking, yeah, heaven forbid you actually write down the wrong number and then you can't find the U and match the record to it and so on and so forth. So that was a big eye opener because that ended up being a 4-year process. And I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have been halfway done with it in 4 years if we hadn't been using EID. So that it's having records and having accurate records. It's really important. I want to get to the software question because people have asked about that. What type of software do you use and why'd you pick that? And just maybe plus, a few comments about using it if you care to share. Let's see, why don't we go to Kristen? I keep going to you last because you shut your camera off. So Kristen, why don't you go first this time?
But shutting the camera off has been working for my benefit.
It is.
The reason, like I said earlier, we run a group of registered NSIP animals, and that's very labor intensive as far as records. Since Targhees are a dual purpose breed, we collect data on just about anything we can think of. I think this year in between the lambing barn to when the ewes go into production, so a 2-year span on the animals, they have 9 different areas that we're collecting data on. And so that was our main driver, was to find something that worked with the NSIP program, and Shearwell did that. And then after looking at the program and whatnot, the reports that thing can generate, I really like. For me personally, I like their format. And we ended up getting the Shearwell drafting crate, and that's made a huge difference for us as far as having accurate sorts. I put things into the program on the computer in my house in the air conditioning in July, which is lovely, and then put it into the stock recorder, take it down, stick it in the crate, and let the machine sort. And that has been wonderful. So really at the end of the day, the main reason we went with Shearwell and FarmWorks was the NSIP. And then later we stuck with it because of all of the reports and what we could do with the software.
Okay, good. Elaine, how about you?
We're with Shearwell as well. And mostly we made that decision because it seemed like they had the most complete options for what we were looking for at the time. And other groups may have still been writing theirs or developing it, and asking producers, questions of how or what they would use, and Shearwell seemed to have kind of the package. And getting started, you might not know what you need, and it seemed like they had a pretty good base of what producers, what was working. So that's what we went with.
Great. And Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, so we use we like doing a lot of crazy stuff. So we use Shearwell EID tags, we use Gallagher hardware, and we use Sapien Technologies software. Sapien's technology is a animal management system out of Australia. The downsides to them is time zone issues, but we're on the West Coast, so our evenings are their morning, our afternoons are their mornings, and so we hadn't had any issues there. I think on the East Coast it'd probably be a little more challenging because you'd have to probably go on a conference call at 7 at night. But anyway, so we use them for our livestock, or for our sheep, and then we use Gallagher's software for our cattle. And we've tried a lot, we've gone through a lot, and we kind of just felt like that systems worked the best. We really like the HR5 wand from Gallagher. With the cattle, it's a safety thing. It's the shear well is, you know, maybe a foot long, and you have to have the reader right pretty close to the tag to read. Whereas the Gallagher, it's a stick that's probably 3 feet long, and so you can be in a cattle chute and stick it down and scan tags in a run and not, you know, lean all the way over and have a cow knock you in the head. And then it has a good interface. And then the shear well tags they're literally the best we've ever been able to find. So we use those shear well tags all the time. And we do use the all flex tags in our cows though too, because, you know, why do them all the same?
Well,
But
I think you just covered the big question we always get, which is, can we mix and match things?
yeah, so an EID tag, it's a radio frequency that's emitted out, and so anything that can read a radio frequency should be able to pick that up. So your True Test, All Flex, Gallagher, all the readers are the same. Where it changes or where it gets a little tricky is in the software, and it's the uploading of the data into your software program. Some are more user-friendly than others. They all can be a little challenging, and the more data you collect, the more precise you have to be in the collection. But then, you know, the more precise you are in the collection, the better, the more usable the data tends to be. So it definitely is there's a learning curve there in that, but it's amazing. You know, I keep going back to when we started on the foot rot. If you just start with one trait and just focus on that one trait and work on that one trait, it'll pay you back. And then you can then expand it to other things. So we started with foot rot, expanded to pregnancy status and kind of how their production value. And now last couple of years, we've been keeping track of wool in there too. So you just slowly expand it and you can expand the potential of it. Yeah, I feel like we barely scratched the surface of what we can do with the tools that we have there, but we've already paid for the equipment. It's definitely worth doing. So.
Okay, Kristen mentioned the auto sort gate, and we have a request from one of the audience members to have you guys explain the level of automation EID has allowed you to reach in your operation. So automation practices or whatever, besides just scanning the wand and putting it in. Ryan, you want to go first on that? Anything to add there?
Yeah, so we bought a farm quip, which is owned by Gallagher, sold in Canada, but not in the US right now. It's a sheep handler. We got it imported in, and anyway, but it's a handler, so it's an air-powered squeeze, so like a cattle squeeze, but for sheep, where it catches them like on an automatic sensor. It reads the tag. It's got a 3-way sort, has a scale on it if you want to do scale work, and and it also has a wonderful tilt table with complete access to the feet. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Racewell. It's the same type of system, except it kind of grabs them from the top, whereas the Racewell grabs them from the bottom. And where we're doing a lot of footwork or a foot analysis now, not work, which is great, we like to have that access to the feet. And so that's why we went with that one. But that's like the labor savings on that. It literally took the worst job on the ranch and turned it into like the best, because now you get to crank up your Bluetooth speaker, put on some Rolling Stones and some reggaeton, and trim some feet. It's fun. So, and then we use it for Preg scanning and everything else too. So it's pretty handy shoot that we got there. So
that's cool. Elaine, I don't mean to put any pressure on you, but can you top that one?
I can't. These are things we dream of as investments.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't cheap. That one cost us like 20,000, but it was. I mean, it's crazy. So like you talk about how it pays for itself. So we knew we were going to improve, but you take your increase in lambing percentage, it pays for it. One thing that it did is, so when we were trimming feet, I'm sure everybody's done it, but you got to grab the sheep, wrestle it, throw it on its back. We had an old barrel that we used to roll them into, but it's a really labor intensive job, and you have injuries, and we have employees, and so we have workers' comp. Our workers' comp has gone down since 2016, over $100,000 a year we've decreased. Like just that savings, like keeping the people you're working with safer and having fewer injuries is an incredible value that I think is really underused in agriculture in general, and definitely was I mean, we didn't expect that benefit. And of course, it's other things too. It's not just that sheep shoot, but that is one of the most labor-intensive jobs. We automated it, and the EIDs helped kind of facilitate all that. And it was this huge secondary payback in our workers' comp savings. And that's no joke. I'm not exaggerating that number at all. It's unbelievable, that the drop in that. Part of that's California, but.
No comment. Okay. So yeah, we had a basic question come in early that we should go ahead and handle. How old are the lambs when you tag them? Elaine, you want to go first? And I'm saying EID tag. Yeah.
Yep, less than a day.
Okay.
Sometimes they're dry.
All right. Julie, or not Julie, Kristen, sorry. Got your name right here in the wrong thing since your picture's not up. Kristen, how old are the lambs when you actually put EIDs in them, or do you, for that matter, I guess?
Same as Elaine. Sometimes they're dry. And just kind of whenever we get to them, they're within 4 to 24 hours old when I tag.
Okay. Ryan, how about you on the lamb side?
We tag and pair all of the ewe lambs, white-faced ewe lambs, to their mothers that go through the barns and mark them as a twin or triplet. And then we tag all the other white-faced females at marking. So that'll be right at like a month, like that. So.
Okay.
There's a great YouTube video. If you just YouTube it, it shows you how to do it, to leave a little space to let the ear grow. But.
Yep. Good. Thanks, guys. And Kristen, a question for you. How are you tracking wool traits in the shear-well program?
I'm not sure how my internet connection is right now, but that is definitely not something it excels at, but I haven't really found any EID program that's made for wool traits. At this point, I'm putting it into the comments on each sheep. So like when we do fleece weights for the lambs, I want the tag, weigh the fleece, just stick the fleece weight in as a comment, same with staple and same with micron. So it's there on my stock recorder. It's also linked to the animal in the program. Unfortunately, it's not a sortable report, but it's there. And I can go through later on and put those things into a management group depending upon how I want to sort, depending upon fleece traits.
Okay, good. And Ryan, while you were describing all of your software and equipment, a bunch of people asked questions about the software. In particular, you want to, was it Sapien software? Is that right? Did I say that right?
Yes, it's Sapien. It's SAPIEN Technologies out of Australia.
So several people asked about that, and somebody in particular asked about, are you using it for pedigree pairing?
You can. We don't, but you can. It has the potential to track pedigrees back quite a few generations, I think 6 or 7. And then that one actually, you can track the wool. We mark a coarse wool trait on our coarser wool sheep, and pre-shearing, we run them through an auto drafter and cut them out and shear them separate. And so that's why I mentioned we started tracking wool, and that's kind of how we're doing that. You can definitely put in fleece weights, microns, and all that stuff in the Sapien.
Fantastic. Okay, switching gears from the greatness of EID, what is your biggest challenge in what became your biggest challenge in implementing EID, and how'd you overcome it? Ryan, you want to go first since you just got done talking and your voice is warmed up?
Sure, let me get my radio voice on. So when we started, me and our team, we put together a list of 57 traits we wanted to track and learn all about. And so we put this big list together, and we're like, all right, we're gonna track everything. We're gonna change the world. It's gonna be the best ever. And so we go and we take sheep number 1 of 4,000 and put it in the chute. And we spend like 7 minutes taking like, okay, face color, hoof shape, hoof, you know, what's the disposition of the wool, what body condition is it, what's when we do all this stuff, and then by about sheep 5 and half an hour later, we realized that it was going to take us probably about 2/3 of the year to put all that information on every sheep that we had. So then we had another meeting. We sat down and we said, all right, let's focus on these big things. Like foot rot is number 1. That's what we're working on. How can we simplify our traits on our feet? Because I think for feet, we had like claw angle, we had how many feet trimmed, the severity of the infection. We had a lot of different traits that we were tracking. And by narrowing it down, we narrowed it to 1 or 2 simple things that we could easily track. And that made it so the data was accessible and is easily recordable. And so that was probably the biggest surprise, was, you know, going in with too much expectation. Of course, we knew we were biting off more than we could chew, but we figured let's try it and pare it back to where we can handle it rather than going too low. But yeah, I'd say, you know, figuring out that first year and a half of what data do you really need and how do you track it correctly so you can be consistent year over year over year.
Great. Kristen, how about you? Biggest challenge and how'd you overcome it?
I guess the biggest challenge for us was just figuring out, kind of same thing as Ryan, what was our initial goal. And again, with the register stuff, we were already taking a whole bunch of stuff that we knew what we were doing with those. On the commercials, it was what do we want to focus on first and then expand from there. You know, since we had no baseline to know what those ewes were doing, the first year we just took data realistically. And then the second year we started making decisions. And I'm kind of glad we did it that way, because you had a better idea what to expect from them. But like I said, the first year we took lambing data and we took weaning data. And now we're, you know, I took udder scores and body scores and lambing ease scores while we were lambing ewes in this past April. And just as we got more comfortable with the software, got more comfortable with what we could do with it, we've just kind of increased what we keep track of.
Hey, Elaine, how about you? Biggest challenge and how'd you guys overcome it?
Yeah, I echo that in that the challenge is kind of knowing all of the capabilities of the system and kind of honing in on what you want to use it for as you learn and grow and expand and get better. Because that was our goal, is to get better before we got bigger. And so as we've done that, we've learned more about the capabilities. And when we first got started, Ryan had mentioned the time difference between you know, maybe IT of the systems, and we had that as well when we first got started, because Shearwell was you know, based in England. So we had a situation where our recorder was on UK time, and we'd bring it in from the field and try to do a download to the computer, which was on American time, and we ended up losing some data. But in working with folks and kind of acknowledging that was an issue, there's patches and there's updates that continue to be made, and you know, now things are running smoothly in that area. So just as one example of a challenge that we faced.
Great. Well, we've almost used up all the time, so let's just close out with maybe some closing remarks of advice that you might give producers in terms of a place to start, or if they're thinking of adopting EID in their operation, where should they start, or what should they think about first? Just some closing remarks from each of you. So Elaine, if you want to go first, that'd be fine.
Okay. with electronic identification, it may be time consuming, but it's not prohibitive. And if you invest in the system, use it. The more years that you're into it, the more profitable it becomes. And for us on our farm, it's probably the most useful equipment that we have on the farm.
Okay, Kristen, how about you? Closing words of advice for all of our listeners if they're thinking of adopting EID.
The first year kind of is less than fun, figuring everything out, tagging all of those sheep. It was really great the year we discovered there are no more adult sheep to tag, and then my husband bought more, and I was unimpressed. But the first year it's a steep learning curve. But the bright side is that there's more and more people that are using it. That a lot of the producers that use it have been using it, are very open to, giving you advice. You can bounce ideas off of them and go, hey, I ran into this. Have you seen this before? The worst answer is no, I've never seen that before. I don't know what you did. But that's would be my advice, is don't be too scared of it. It is an awesome piece of equipment to use. It definitely has saved a pile of labor hours for us here, and we're way more confident in our culling decisions, selection decisions. It's definitely worth looking into, and even if you don't track 9 different NSIP traits with it and you're just keeping track of which ewe belongs to what lamb, it's definitely worth it.
Ryan, how about you? Closing words of advice for other producers.
Sure. Yeah. I think I'll echo that the first year is a learning curve, for sure. Be realistic with yourself. Be realistic with what you're trying to do. It's absolutely critical to set goals and then be constantly evaluating whether you're going in that direction or not. EIDs can be really cool. You can throw a lot of money towards stuff, but if you're not using that data to return profitability to your ranch, you probably shouldn't be doing them. The second thing I'd echo that was brought up is that don't be afraid to travel. Call people, ask people, go on Instagram, message people. I mean, everybody, I'm always open to take people around and show them what we're doing. I know a lot of my neighbors and a lot of friends all around the country would do that for you. And then even traveling abroad too. I mean, you go to other countries and they're excited to show off. They think they're better than us, but they ain't. But they love to show it off. But so don't be afraid to go. And just go out and travel and see what other people are doing and bring those best ideas back to your place. And then kind of third, the final thing is EIDs don't change. They don't make perfect sheep. It takes a person dedicated to that animal. It takes a person dedicated to the husbandry, to the nutrition, to all of the things that make good sheep good sheep. It's a tool, and on our operation, it's an invaluable tool right up there with the best people that we have. But those people make it work. Without them, and it'd be worthless. It would just be another program on my screen behind me. It wouldn't, it's not going to turn you any money unless you have that. You have that commitment to the ranch, and you're paying attention to those animals, and they're the ones driving your decisions, not the software or the want to use it.
Thank you. And I really want to thank all 3 of you, Elaine and Kristen and Ryan, for sharing your expertise with us this evening. And I know our listeners appreciate it. Dr. Logan, I don't know if you want to rejoin us here to help close this out with thank yous. We also want to thank Julie with her presentation to kick things off, and of course, make sure that we thank ASI for providing the funding for this, and then their cooperative agreement with the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS by the acronym. You guys all know the government loves acronyms, so USDA APHIS for their cooperative agreement with ASI to help fund these webinars. So they've been learning experiences, and we really appreciate the producers that step out ahead of the game and learn and then share those experiences to maybe shorten the learning curve for others. So definitely appreciate all 3 of you on here tonight. So thank you for that. And again, thank Julie and thank Jim for their kicking us off here this evening. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and close out. We've used up our time, and wish everybody a great evening, and hopefully everybody's having a great summer and it continues to be great. So everybody take care, and thanks again.